It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, December 18th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is asking where the Flyers goals are coming from versus where they should be coming from.
That's a good question.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for about a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. Today's episode is brought to you by Bilt Rewards. Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl. And to keep up with all of our latest episodes and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials, including Blue Sky, and of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Flyers do, in fact, face the Detroit Red Wings tonight. We're going to get into that later in the show since we just saw them. There's not much else to preview about that team, and we'll get to your mailbag questions. But I think, looking at practice yesterday, the most important thing I think to bubble to the surface there is that it's the same lines as it's been for the past several days and games. So it looks like Emil Andre is getting scratched for the third game in a row, which
It's just
we said one or two
stupidity.
is fine.
It's stupidity. It really is. Even two, I felt like was stupidity because whatever he thinks he's teaching him, he's no longer teaching him. Watching for one game, fine. It's no longer teaching. It's not a positive. And the team misses out on a lot of other aspects of his game.
Yeah, I think, creating scoring opportunities from the blue line, I think in terms of clean zone exits and, rushes down the ice that are a little bit more organized, I would say,
Right.
with Andre in there. He just has this aggressiveness that some of the other defenders don't get. And,
I
I
also
think
think,
that,
not to interrupt, I also think his stretch passes are better than Drysdale.
yeah, I would agree with that. I think the Flyers stretch passes for the last several years have been a struggle
They
across the
have.
board. They've made some generally bad decisions on those passes in terms of how long those passes are, when to
Yep.
do them. A lot of pucks, getting picked off by the other team on that front. But Andre has found a way around that in a lot of instances. So that is definitely something they have missed for sure. But so, we'll see if that holds in terms of the lineup for the game. And we'll get into that on tomorrow's show when we recap it. But looking at the Flyers scoring overall, we talked a little bit about Matvei Michkov and Joel Farabee yesterday on the show in terms of where they are versus where they should be. And that kind of brings up this bigger picture question on the Flyers overall of where their scoring is coming from versus where it should be coming from. So I think, for the purposes of this exercise, we're looking at the last 10 games because the Flyers were kind of up and down. But I feel like as a whole, offensively, while they haven't been successful per se across the board, they've been more consistent in terms of the kind of game they like to play
Okay.
over the last 10 games, right?
Yeah, I think there's truth to that. The overall number, though, I just looked it up just to kind of intro into this. So the Flyers have one scorer in the top 50. One.
Yeah.
Travis Konecny.
Yep. So that is definitely where the lion's share of the Flyers goals are coming from. Now, also looking at the last 10 games, we love Scott Laughton. I am the biggest Scott Laughton fan on this planet. That 4-goal game was such an anomaly
It is.
that I feel like including that in the stats is a little bit of a cheat in some ways, and it kind of messes with the numbers. So academically, we are eliminating that 4-goal game from the conversation, even though
Now, if he
it
has
is
another
amazing.
4-goal game, we'll put it back in. But he won't.
Exactly. In our hearts, it is still
Of
there.
course.
But,
We all smile just talking about it. It's great.
yes, of course. So Travis Konecny, 4 goals, 7 assists in the last 10 games, 25 shots on goal in those 10 games, which is a little low, I would say, but in terms of the shots, but he's so far above the expected goal stat for him for that time period. It was 2.97, and he has 4 goals. So I'll take that number of shots on goal for Travis
No, it's
Konechny if
working.
that's the end result there. So other than we did see that missed open net in the Minnesota game that's going to
Yep.
haunt him and haunt us. But for the most part, Travis Konechny is doing the job that he has been assigned to do.
No
Right.
question. Yeah, he is.
All right. So in the last 10 games, the Flyers are 5-3-2, 12 points. In the same time period, there's a range of 9 to 12 games played for all the teams across the league. In that time in division, the Caps, Pens, and Devils have a higher point percentage than the Flyers do. Everybody else in the division is lower. The Flyers have 33 goals for in that 10 game span. So they're at 3.3 goals for per game played, 3.2 goals against per game played. And that's where the record comes into play. Why the Flyers don't have a stronger record. It's the defensive side of things to some degree. And that's why they need to score more goals.
Right. But I'll also add that this is their most successful part of the season for goals because they're like 2.7 or something for the year. So they're,
Correct.
that much of it doesn't seem like much, 2.7, 3.3, but it is. It's a lot.
It really is, because if you look in that time frame of the Flyers' last 10 games, they're 9th in the NHL in goals for per game played for that 3.3. They're 9th in shots per game played, which was much higher than I would have guessed before I pulled those numbers in terms of where they are in the league. So we can tell they've gotten better in terms of having additional chances, having additional shots on goal. But they're still, 5-3-2 is really good in that 10 game span. But that margin of error, I think, could lead them to more wins.
Yeah, I do too. There's a couple things. The first thing is definitely the way the defense is deployed. They're not talking about it. We talk about it. Okay. So you go back to another episode and you could listen to it. That's the last couple. We've mentioned it a few times. Beyond that, as far as if we're getting into, well, why else? All right, well, if you have the puck more than the other guy, which is what Andre's good at, you're missing that. Are you purposefully not playing Emil Andre because you're playing bigger teams? If that's the case, then just trade Emil Andre because some other team will use him and not worry about that because they'll just put him with a bigger defenseman and let him do his thing. You can't really worry about, oh, well, this team's a big team where they check hard, or if you're going to protect him, he's not for you. That's really the way it is.
Yeah, I think, there's something to be said for offense from defense, right? That's something that people
Eric
in all
Carlson went a
sports say,
decade
right?
doing that. Yeah. Now he
Right.
can't. Now it's caught up to
And
him.
so, and we'll talk about like where should they be getting it from a little bit in the next segment. But in terms of like where we are now, as far as lines go, obviously it's that Tippett, Frost, Michkov line, other than Travis Konechny, right? We see like Michkov and Konechny when they're together on the power play and when they were together earlier in the season, they're the best combo on the team, hands down, if you look at, goal scoring logs. But they have to be separated for reasons that, Torts knows, we know it's fine.
Right.
So this Tippett, Michkov, Frost line, those three have the top goals per 60 on the team in the last 10 games as a combined line. And Tippett has 5 goals and an assist. Michkov, 4 goals and 7 assists. Frost, 3 goals and 3 assists in those 10 games. And I guess the question is too much of the burden on them, or everybody else should be doing more as well?
I mean, it's okay to have like a best line and others need to do better. This year, I wonder, are they going to have as many 20 goal scorers as last year? You added Michkov. If you don't, something's wrong. It's formulatic. It's partially on the players, but it's also partially in usage.
Right. And I think that this line, obviously,
formulatic. I don't know what that word is. What's that word?
I think it's formulaic.
Formulaic. Thank you.
Yeah, but I do think that this line has emerged as, the most productive line on the team, even though Travis Konechny is the most productive individual on the team overall. Now, I know Tippett has one more goal than Konechny does, but Konechny also provides a ton of puck support and playmaking that Tip is just not an assist guy in the grand scheme of things, right? And the fact that it has taken Owen Tippett finally coming into his own this season and finally getting going to make the difference on this line, as opposed to putting that burden on Michkov, I think is pretty telling, right? It's an individual effort, to your point earlier in the segment. It's individuals that have taken steps forward rather than a cohesive offensive strategy that's getting more people on the board.
Right. So here's the other thing. And this is where I take Sam Ersson a little to task. Goals against is a team stat. Flyers are 33rd. 33rd. That's where Sam Ersson ranks. He's 33rd in goals against, and that's not great.
No, it's not, but that has nothing to do with the offense on the team
No, but it
in
has
the
to do with
grand
that.
scheme of
It
things.
has to do with that, the record part where you're saying they're
Correct.
scoring 32,
Correct.
33, and they're giving up 32. That's part of it. That's all I'm saying. It's in that equation. That's all.
Yeah. No, absolutely it is. And that's why they're, 5-3-2 as opposed to maybe 8-2. Right?
Correct. Yep.
That is the line that's making the difference there. So the Flyers need to score more. And
Right.
so we're going to talk about the who's, the what's, and the whys of that, plus Flyers versus Red Wings part 2 coming up next. The World Series, the Super Bowl, and the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork also protects your financial legacy and your family's future. Select Quotes licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. You invest so much time to take care of yourself to be the healthiest, best version of you. Select Quotes exclusive policies can reward that effort. If you're in good health, they work with carriers. They can get you same day coverage for up to $5 million with no medical exam required. And these policies are more affordable than you think. You can get coverage for up to $1 million for as little as $20 per month. So head to selectquote.com and a licensed insurance agent will call you right away with the right policy for your life and your budget. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. That's selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. Select Quote, they shop, you save.
Here's the thing. We earn points on groceries, travel, and practically everything else we buy. But we should also be earning points on rent, one of our biggest monthly expenses. Bilt changed the game by letting renters earn high-value points on rent in and around the neighborhood. There's no cost to join Bilt, and as a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and on your everyday spending. Bilt points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world you can redeem your Bilt points toward. Points can be also redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only Bilt members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? Start earning points by paying rent now when you go to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl. That's joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl to start earning points with your rent payments today.
All right, on tomorrow's show, we will be recapping tonight's game against the Detroit Red Wings, plus previewing a new opponent for the season in the LA Kings. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Kings later in the show today, so stay tuned for that as well. Now, looking at where the Flyers could be doing better in terms of scoring, again, looking at the last 10 games as an indicator here. Obviously, I think one of the big elephants in the room we talked about yesterday is Joel Farabee. Farabee and Couturier, to be honest, could and should be shouldering more of the workload from Travis Konechny on that line in terms of production. Sean Couturier has 2 goals, 3 assists in those 10 games, which is about as expected. But 16 shots on goal in 10 games isn't enough for Sean Couturier, in my opinion.
Like, he's just basically turning into a defensive forward.
Right. And they're failing defensively to a large degree. And Torts has shouted that from the rooftops.
Right. So it is a little puzzling.
It is. It really is. So he's absolutely got to be taking more shots. Joel Farabee, on the other hand, most shots on goal on the team in that 10 game period with 29. 44 chances for, third on the team, 29 scoring chances for, highest on the team in the last 10 games. However, a goal and 2 assists in that time period, which is way below the expected goals for of 4.02, given all those scoring chances. So, like Travis Konechny is right. He's getting all the chances. Joel Farabee is getting all the chances in the world. He's just not finishing. And that would make such a big difference on that line because not only would it support Travis Konechny, but I think it would bail Sean Couturier out a little bit.
It would, but I mean, it's also a situation where he's just not hitting the net. Like, he's just not hitting the net because there was a game last week he had no shots. Then there was only one game where he had 4, and these are registered shots. I get that he's shooting the puck otherwise.
I mean, it's 44-29, right?
Yeah, that's a lot of misses. Guess what, Rachel? You know what you could do about that? If there are missed shots on the team, you could get a shooting coach to come in, not just a
I knew
skills
where that
coach,
was
but a
going.
shooting coach. We can move on now.
Yeah, I mean, seems like whatever Owen Tippett is doing, maybe Joel Farabee needs to figure that same thing out, at least
Yeah.
for the moment with Owen Tippett.
Yes.
But I think that's a big part of it, right? Because that's ostensibly their top line,
Yes.
right? Maybe not so much now, but they're in name the top line. And I think if Farabee could finish a little bit more and Couturier could start taking more shots, that's the first main thing that would help the Flyers offensively. Looking at other depth scoring, we did a kind of in-depth look at the Cates line a little ways back. And, in the last 10 games, they've combined for 4 goals and 6 assists, which is not necessarily great on paper. But if you look at their ice time, it's a lot less. So
Right.
I feel
They're
like
productive.
they're productive proportional to their ice time.
Right.
But I do think getting Bobby Brink on the board more would be super helpful to get more depth scoring out of the Flyers here. So he has a goal and 2 assists, but 13 shots on goal in the last 10 games. And I feel like with Cates being more the defensive forward center, like anchor of this line, and Forster taking it as many shots as he can get to, but he's also turned into a little bit more of a defensive forward, right? We've talked about that.
Yes.
Brink is the linchpin here in this line, and so he needs to be shooting a lot more.
No question about that. I have 2 things though what's preventing him from doing that. One is not enough power play time. I mean, when
Well,
power play
there's
2
that.
gets on there, there's not enough time for him to even get set up. He gets one shot, luckily, usually on the power play. If it's a big power play, he might get 2, but he usually gets 1. So that's one thing I've noticed. The other thing is he failed in the offseason to get stronger. Like, if you watch Alex DeBrincat, who might be shorter than him, he is much, much more developed and stronger. Brink has to get physically stronger. I've watched him getting pushed around, and he gets pushed off the puck, and sometimes he gets pushed to the ground. That's preventing him from getting shots too.
Yeah, I think he has gotten some power play one time recently.
Okay.
In the past few games.
But I haven't seen enough shots from that even.
Right, and that's the power
That's fair.
plays problem to some
Yes,
degree.
that's
But
true.
Brink, they did move Brink up to power play 1.
Okay.
So
So I didn't
I
see
think
enough. I missed a little of that. Okay.
regardless, I think your point about his physicality or lack thereof in some of his play has been an issue. And I think, that's where some of the chemistry of this line can come into play, where Brink just has to be smarter about, when he's battling or he has the puck, when to dish it off so then he can reposition himself into
Right.
open ice,
Yeah.
right? And avoid getting into these long drawn out board battles or battles in the corner, all of that. I think there's a way around that to utilize his skill to the better of his ability.
Yeah, I agree with that. But again, if you're a team like Detroit, you're going to put a more physical lineup against that line because
Yeah,
in the end you
you are.
probably can get it past. You could probably get the puck away from Brink.
Yeah, you can. And as far as like other depth scoring goes, I mean, the fourth line is the fourth line. I would say that the only thing of note here is that Ryan Poehling has 1 goal and 8 assists this season, 0 goals in the last 10 games. I think, Garnet Hathaway, 20 shots on goal in 10 games and 1 goal. So he's not hitting the target as much as he has in the past. And Poehling is nowhere to be found on the score sheet. And I think, we're not expecting huge outputs from this line, but maybe like 3 or 4 goals from this line, other than Scott Laughton's 4-goal game, I think would be great.
So, yeah, Garden Hathaway is starting to get ice cut a little bit, but like still getting over 10 minutes a game. He's averaging like 12-10. Bobby Brink's averaging 12-34. I mean, you want to get more points out of Bobby Brink, give him more ice time. But then I looked at Instat and I noticed Bobby Brink's only getting 52% offensive zone starts. Why? I don't have an
That's
answer
because
for that.
Cates and Forster are defensive forwards, and they're giving the line defensive zone starts. That's what that
Well,
is.
then he should be on a different line then. Because
There could be something
you
to
can't
that.
have an offensive guy on a mostly defensive line. That's cutting out what
Well,
he can
I don't know
do.
that I agree with that, but I think Forster needs to be scoring more as more of a balanced two-way forward
Okay,
in
but I
that
mean,
scenario.
Brink needs to have the puck and have opportunities to make plays, right? Because he
Yeah.
can do playmaking and scoring. But if he's getting a lot of defense, if he's getting almost more than half of his own starts are defensive, he's up against it. Like there is going to be a limit to how many points he could score that way.
Yeah, there is certainly something to that. We'll see
I don't
if
know the exact answer. That's why I'm just kind of throwing it out there in the ether.
right. So we'll see if any of that happens in the game against the Red Wings. They have only played one game since the game against the Flyers, and that was a 4-2 win over the Toronto Maple Leafs. They had not fired their head coach, and honestly, a shock to me. But I guess they're going to stick with him for the duration and see how it goes. But
Well, the GM's
the
not doing a great job either, so that could be why.
well, there's that. But I think the one interesting thing to come out of that win over the Leafs is that in their post game, they all talked about how they were taking more shots as opposed to making that extra pass or trying to find the perfect shot, which has been kind of their downfall as of late. And they saw that it worked in the third period against the Flyers, which it did.
Mm-hmm.
And they carried that over to the Leafs game and won. So that's what the Flyers need to be prepared for, is to have the whole game look like the third period from the last game. And they're going to have better mashups, better shot suppression, and preventing those rush attacks up front, because the Red Wings are just going to shoot instead of holding on to it.
Right. No, I think, look, I mean, you shoot more, you should score more. But, like again, we watched the last game. Patrick Kane is not even close to Patrick Kane. I used to get, dinged for talking about him the last year and a half that he has really slowed down. Like last year, he had 20 goals. That was good. He's not getting 20 goals this year unless all of a sudden he goes on fire. It's 25 games in. He's got 3 goals. So you just, you got to just watch him, but he's not as big a threat as he used to be. There's other guys that are definitely threatening on that team. Larkin, again, is just a handful, and he was a handful last game. Ben Sherratt was a problem. Like Ben Sherratt looked
He's
like,
always a problem against the
I
Flyers.
guess, because
He always has been.
yeah, he had a good game last game, which was surprising. And DeBrincat was kind of like being Brad Marchand. So even if he wasn't scoring, he was pushing some players around, like he was getting nasty with them. So, they have a good bunch of guys. They're not a good team, but they can win games. So you have to just play them smart. And I think they only gave one power play and they didn't score on that power play. That's how they have to beat them.
Yeah, I think it's just puck management is going to be a huge thing. Supporting the goalie, but not getting in their way if the Red Wings are going to be shooting more,
Right.
and hopefully have some good luck with the matchups again, because it's going to be on the road. So we'll see how that goes and talk about it on tomorrow's show. In the meantime, y'all have some great mailbag questions. We're going to get to them coming up next. Today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. If you love sports, you're going to love PrizePicks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your favorite sports, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the action. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. When your PrizePicks hit They make it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. PrizePicks also offers fun weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where select player projections are discounted up to 25%. So download the app today, use the code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly. PrizePicks, run your game. So, in our mailbag today, we have several really good questions here. And looking at the first one from a soccer fan whose username is a combination of Messi and Ronaldo. Rookie comparisons drive me crazy for the most part. Evaluation is one thing, but they're kids and not everything is predictable. And I thought that was a good comment.
That's
Like,
true.
does that hold?
For drafts, I never give comparables, and I'm hesitant even for first year, second year players. Yeah, I'm hesitant. I'm not that guy that likes to give out the comparables because you can lead someone the wrong way, like a fan or somebody that doesn't get to see him as much. And so I'm with them. I agree.
Yeah, I think so too. They said a side note about how crazy it was. We forget that Matvei Michkov lost his father recently, and
Yes.
he's still achieving like this. And for a young guy, I think there's something to be said for that. That he's been kind of pushing
Listen, he's a
through. And
brave kid. I mean, he's come to a
yeah,
different country. Like my dad's still alive and he's 91. I don't know how I would act even at my age without my dad. It's a big deal.
yeah, it really, really is. Brian asked, "How about the Matvei Michkov, Frost and Tippett line?" Well, we talked about him earlier in the
We did.
show. About the last 10 games. This season long, they've had 22 games together as a line, and the stats weren't stellar, in the whole season, but the last 10 games, obviously, a ton better. And really the thing about that line is as Owen Tippett goes, so goes the line. We've seen like the numbers pick up as soon as Owen Tippett started hitting the net.
Yeah, the numbers are going up. He does have 4 goals in 6 games in December, which is big. The one stat that bothers me right now with Tippett is 8 points in 15 games on the road. I don't know why he's having trouble on the road. Like with that line, he should be for the rest of the year. He should get close to being a point a game player because of Michkov and his shot.
Yeah, and in the last 10 games, Michkov has 3 even strength goals, which is really good. He's starting to score more from even strength,
Yeah,
which is something
that
that
was a
was really
problem early
important.
on, and we saw that, and he's improved on it.
Yep, and at 5-on-5, they have the most points combined at 17 on, the line in the last 10 games as well. So I think, like, this is the line that's leading the team right now
Yeah.
on many fronts, and I think, they just gotta keep it going.
Right.
Hopefully,
Well,
they
that's
can.
the pressure of this is they have to keep it going and others have to get it going. And
Yep.
that's sometimes it doesn't all happen at the same time, but it should.
Absolutely. David sent us an email saying, "I'm thinking that to acquire an elite center, you have to trade an elite forward. Since the Flyers have strength on the right wing side, should they consider trading an elite right winger for an elite center, perhaps a Travis Konechny for a center? And how many teams are there that have a need for a Travis Konechny and an excess of centers that would entertain it?"
Right. So if you were going to trade Travis Konechny, you're going to get like a future hopeful for an elite center. You're not going to get an elite center. So as an example, you might get Quentin Byfield, but you're not getting
Mhm.
uh let's say it's Anze Kopitar like 10 years ago. You're not getting that. You're not getting that quality. You probably wouldn't even get Nugent Hopkins, to be honest. So, as a winger, now, if you trade a top pairing defenseman, then you might be able to get that winger. So, if you that center. So, if you had a team that was solid with 3 centers and you put Oliver Bonk on the line, you might have something. But that's where you have to give up something of that quality.
Right, and that leads us to one of the other questions in the mailbag, from Guido, which was about the trade rumors from, Frank Saravalli, and he talked about with the LA Kings in particular, and Saravalli said, "I don't think it's dead, but I do think they talked to the Flyers about some of the forwards that they have. I'm not saying Konechny, I don't think they're trading Konechny, but there's a whole group of guys that the teams have been calling about: Frost, Farabee, Lawton, and Bobby
Of
Brink."
course, yeah.
the one guy they're not willing to entertain a conversation on is Tyson Forrester, which I thought was interesting. But, Quentin Byfield's name has come up multiple times in
Right.
these conversations.
I mean, look, here's what I told someone who texted me the other day. Go for Alex Turcotte. Like, Alex Turcotte's one of the best stories in the league because he was 5th overall and people buried him 2 years ago. He had a bunch of injuries and he's been slowly getting better. He's sticking as a regular now. His points are going up. He's not going to be a star, but he's going to be a really good center. And so if you can get Alex Turcotte for Zamula, do that.
Yeah.
Try that. If you have to throw in a pick, give him an extra second. Do that.
Yeah.
Alex
I think
Turcotte's only
it's,
23 years old. Remember, he's only 23 and he plays center. There is still upside with this kid.
I mean, it's certainly one of those things where it could be a change of scenery thing
Mhm.
for Turcotte. I
Yeah.
think that the Kings are a very good team, but he hasn't been able to sort of find his groove within that.
Right.
And so that's where I think the change of scenery could potentially help him. Obviously, Byfield has always been at the top of those lists, but and the Flyers and Kings, as we know, have been frequent trading partners. So there's usually something to it when somebody says there's a rumor out there, and we'll see if any triggers get pulled in any trade scenarios here. But
Yeah, just as an
um,
example for like change of scenery, just to point out. Now, he won't do it like this, but he definitely could improve. Gabe Vilardi was a guy that we thought the Flyers should go after many, many times. Right now, this
right,
year, in 32 games, he has 13 goals and 11 assists.
that's pretty great.
That's pretty good.
All right, the last question, not really a question as much as there were several comments about Ian LePerriere and our Phantoms Tuesday show. And, we talked about coaching being an issue and whatnot, but we never kind of outright said, should they fire him or not um, on this week's episode. And I think it's a valid question to ask because, a couple of the comments were like, they should just fire him. And I think with the Phantoms, like in the AHL, firing a coach mid-season is a little odd, right?
So, right. So I would say if they don't make the playoffs, I would fire him.
Yeah.
But here's how I would do it. It's a corporate sneaky trick, but at the end of the season, I would ask Alan McCauley to evaluate him. And if Alan McCauley doesn't evaluate him to fire him, then I'm firing them both.
That is a tough assignment there. But it's certainly a way to
This
motivate
is if they don't
everybody
make the
involved.
playoffs. This is based
Right,
on that.
right, right. So, I think that there's a good chance that they won't make the playoffs this season. They very well could. Again, the division is really tight right now.
Right.
So we'll see what happens there. But I think that this is the case where you have to let the season ride out and see what the end results are and then look at extenuating circumstances, but put an asterisk next to them. And by those circumstances, I mean injuries or call ups that may have really decimated the Phantoms and left him with nothing. But even so, I think you have to look at the prospect development and say, if that's your difference maker here,
You
then
still
you
have
got to move
control over
on.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a tough question, but an important
It is a
question,
tough
and
question.
that's why we talk about the Phantoms every week, and we'll continue to do so. That will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow to talk Flyers versus Red Wings, Flyers versus Kings, which maybe there'll be a trade before it. You never know.
Never
And,
know.
as a reminder, we always want to hear from you. If you want your question answered on the show, just like we talked about, let us know on any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on the same socials. SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey, become a fantasy hockey expert, and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.